in the Northwest, we feel a little excluded. And so the years when we were competing for Division I national championships, that's when we felt like we had the most exposure and our players were getting seen at the national level and, spoken with, and a few of them moved on to play for the national team, that is. And so I would love for there to be more identification of our players. And the question of how we do that, I think, is, it really is on me as director of rugby for the women's team to reach out and make some of these connections. I have a lot of faith in Martha Baines, who has been to this point the Women's Pathway organizer, but now there's a new person there in that role who I will need to reach out to and introduce myself and make sure that he understands that there is really high quality rugby here in the Northwest, and it's worth his time to come out, and I'll invite him out to training sessions and to matches. And I'll also, since all of our BC matches have to be videotaped, and we're trying to videotape all of our US matches as well, I can make game tape available to them, and we can even work on, if we can get some help with it, to highlight certain players and that sort of thing. But we have some fabulous young players. A couple of them, maybe more than a couple, maybe 3 or 4 of them play with the U23s locally, and a couple were selected for the Grizzlies U23 group. But I don't want to just rely on that pathway, because as we know, not everybody wants to participate in that, but they may want to if they understand that, what's possible. And so, so pathway conversations are a little frustrating to me, and probably frustrating to lots of other people in the United States because it's not incredibly clear. The only clear path right now is the WPL. The only place where attention is very clearly spent, and so I want to change that paradigm. So Brandon Sparks is the name of the new pathway director, and I will reach out to him to let him know about us and to invite him out. So the WPL is a great concept. And I think that for the players who are participating in it, it's a good, place for them to be. And speaking with, I had a chance recently when the WPL All-Stars were in town to talk with Carmeli Fahy and also with Hannah Stolba. And so Carmeli coaches New York and Hannah coaches the Berkeley All Blues, and I've coached both of them. So it's really fun to make those connections and to see them, just evolving as coaches and really doing some great work. Nonetheless, they are super enthusiastic about the WPL. And so, I trust certainly that the level of play is as high as it can be. And the level of coaching, I think, is really excellent. The problem with the model, though, is that it's so expensive. And it limits, actually, who can afford to play in it, unless there's some really good sponsorship or donors or whatnot that can help to support players. And we have been courted by the WPL. The Seattle women's team has been courted by the WPL as recently as this past January. And my response has been, I don't want to put that financial burden on our players when we can have very high quality rugby week in and week out in BC, 3 hours away. And so that's my stance on the WPL from a Seattle perspective. From the US perspective, I think that the model is good and model is sound, but I think that the financial woes are you can't ignore them, and so it's not a perfect model. if there were some finances that were available to these WPL teams, maybe there could be some regional setups so that then they could have a WPL season based on regional competitions and basically make it more of an all-star sort of competition, like we used to do. Or maybe there could be like 2 tiers, right? And so there's regional playoffs to get to a championship, so that then it becomes more affordable for everybody. But right now, to me, the expense is just off-putting, and it means that we're not necessarily getting the best players in the United States to play in the WPL. And that's a shame. And then, compounded with the fact that now players are being attracted to overseas play. And so that becomes another challenge in terms of trying to organize national team competitions and such. It's nothing new that there are huge challenges with trying to identify talent in the United States because of how big of a country we are. But I don't think the WPL is exactly the answer, but it's a good competition. And the folks who are invested in the WPL, like their leadership and their steering committee and all this kind of stuff, super people, super smart, great brain trust to move this forward. And they've expanded their number of games and these kinds of efforts that are really excellent. It's just that the basis of player engagement is what's problematic to me. Like, how can we get more players, to be engaged with these teams? Because you can't tell me, yes, though I know, talking with these other coaches that there are efforts to support players who maybe can't afford the travel and that sort of thing. But how many players aren't even trying because they're put off by the cost? In which case I say, come play for Seattle. We have been really fortunate to have a long history of folks playing at that level. And I think that really is helpful in terms of having that level of experience to know, even just what it's like to go to a camp, right? And be able to give some players some insight into that. And that's, for myself, but also from, the Kelsey Stockards and the Janine Duncan /Devoto and of course, Christine Summer, in the most recent years, not, forget about all the past and all the Eagles that we've had in the past. For players to know that they could call up somebody and say, what's this experience like? What should I expect? I think that is a tremendous benefit that our club has that not every other club has, and certainly quite a few, but not every other club has. Also, I think that our coaching staff is really good at skill development. Not just skill development because we all know players who are highly skilled, but they don't necessarily see the game, or they're not good at decision making based on what's in front of them. And I think that is skill development, but it's also this sort of decision making that sometimes doesn't get addressed. And that's what makes the difference on the national scene, right? Everybody can carry a ball up, right, at that level, right? And hopefully maintain possession of it or do the work on the ground to present it well. But what about the next level where, they see the 2 defenders coming, they see nobody on this side, right? So maybe they do a dummy and they take the step and then they get past those defenders. That's those are the sorts of activities that I think that we have to offer. I'm not saying nobody else does, certainly everybody else does, but I think that, when you watch how we play, you're seeing those types of skills come out in our players, again, no matter what numbers on your back. Part of that also, I would add, comes from playing in Canada, because there are a lot of players who are playing at a national level on the teams we play against. Yeah, it was great. I loved it. It's different though. It's a different world in rugby and what people perceive as people capable of playing. So I was first selected to play in 1996. So I was 37 years old. And that would never happen now. But I got to play, up in Canada. It was the Canada Cup, it was called, and it was Canada, France, the US, and New Zealand. And that was, New Zealand was sort of just starting to travel at that point more, and they just kicked Canada's butt. That was the first time we saw them play, and our coach Frank probably was it's like, oh, these Canadians, what's funny about, and then we played New Zealand, and they kicked our butt too. And I just remember sitting in the locker room, everybody's kind of shell shocked. And Frank had referred to this Canadian winger as Blondie. Blondie got beat again. And I said, maybe Blondie wasn't so bad in the locker room. Maybe they're just that good. So, but that was, what was interesting about that my initial experience was a couple things. One is that, I got to play alongside M.A. Sorensen. She was playing hooker at the time, so I literally played alongside of her. And also, that's where I met Trish Turton. It was her first engagement with the U.S. team as well. Barb Bond was the captain, who ended up captaining the '98 World Cup, and you know her well. And she was fabulous, and I just loved her. She challenged us in that match against France. In the front row, she's like, they were collapsing the scrum at the 5-meter scrum, and she's like, if you want to score this, then you have to hold them up and push them across the line. I was like, okay. But it was like in that Barb Bond, very serious way. And I was like, no way, I'm going to let that woman down. And we did. We scored in the next scrum. So it was brilliant. Got to play with Jen Crawford, and it was just this litany of really fabulous rugby players, and I got hooked in that very initial, series of games. I got to play in a World Cup final. I mean, there's not a lot of people around who can say that. And I remember many details about that final, and I remember just, the thrill of it all. And the disappointment, quite honestly. I mean, we lost to New Zealand. Nobody expected us to win, but we challenged them, and it was pretty awesome. And I remember Frank asked me, Liz, what do you think? How do you feel about the game? I said, I wish we could play them again tomorrow, because we were just like figuring things out, and not that it would have been a different outcome, but just that was kind of like what I felt like was like, give us another shot. Unfortunately, it's the World Cup final, you don't get another shot. And then, so we went through a couple of different coaching changes with the U.S. women's team, and that's all built, and contributed to my experiences and what I want to bring to our players as a coach. And that includes the eventuality of Kathy Flores being named as the head coach in 2002, I believe. Yeah, after the 2002 World Cup. So, I played in that World Cup as well, and it was a very different experience. We were a collection of players that were not necessarily prepared to play at that level. And so Kathy came in and really needed to re-energize, rebuild, and begin a growth pathway, and I think she did that. And I'm so excited I got to play for her in a U.S. jersey, and that was my last couple of matches, which was ironically right back in Canada where I started. I got to play out again. Let's see, we played against Canada and against England, very tight matches, and I just remember playing my last match, and I was 45 years old, and I was like, I'm kind of tired. But I loved that Kathy had enough belief in me to run me out there on the field and leave me in for a lot longer than I expected. But it was a joy to play for her, and so all those experiences together were thrilling. Traveling was so exciting, lifelong friendships being made, all that, really lovely stuff about playing for the national team, not to mention just the skill development in the rugby that how I grew in rugby. but the best part now in reflection is how those experiences really have shaped me as a coach, and it's been really positive. I'm a pretty positive person, and so as I look forward, and I want to think about the impact that possibly I could have on future coaches. Yeah, that's what I want to have, is no matter what you're dealt, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it, just put it in your bucket of things you're going to learn from, and tools that you're going to use, or tools that you shouldn't use. And it all contributes to a good outcome if you just weigh it all, and then see how players respond too. That's the biggest thing. And I guess the one other thing I would say that I really value now about those national team experiences is creating environments where players are competing, but they're competing in a way that everybody gets lifted, nobody feels left behind or shunned or othered in any way. And so that's a huge goal of mine on this team, on the Seattle team, is to create that atmosphere. And it was really pretty telling in our team meeting at the beginning of the year, the players named that as a goal. And so that's, again, coming back to the award, we're on the right path, and a lot of it is just because of our team leadership. Really great opportunity for our players to see, to compare themselves, really, right? To compare our level of play with what is considered to be the best in the United States. And I think that there were some awesome comparisons in terms of style, in terms of collisions and and contact and whatnot. And I think that there were a lot of our players there, first of all, and several of them had played in the U23 curtain raiser match, and a couple of them got to sit on the bench for the natives group, because they had some experienced some injuries in a Wednesday match that they had. So that was a thrilling experience for those couple. But overall, I think our players walked away going, wow, we are, again, I keep using these words, but we're on the right track. We're in a good place to play this same quality of rugby, right? It's probably a little faster than we played, honestly. But super high quality and, kind of fearless rugby, right? And some really creative rugby. And nothing that they hadn't experienced or seen themselves. And I think that's the best part of it. Set piece mistakes, they happen even at the highest level, right? And so don't beat yourself up, just keep going forward. And then, and some of the relentlessness in terms of the defensive work that was done that night. And then also some of the creative play in terms of attack. And our players on the Seattle team have seen all of that. And so I think it was a really good gauge for our players to say, I'm in exactly the right place to develop skills that are at that level. And so I think they came away really motivated. A lot of sponsorship. That's all it would take, honestly. Not all. I mean, structurally though, quite honestly, like I said, I think the WPL structure is, they're very creative and also realistic in terms of what they're working on developing. And I think that there would be room for expansion. And I think that if there was sponsorship that could support not just that group, but that group as a at least part of the conversation, then I think there could be some real conversation about what would this look like. Would it be in partnership with the MLR? I don't know, maybe. Would it maintain a separate identity as WPL? I don't know. What would the power be in terms of thinking about hosting a World Cup in the early 2030s? If there were, for instance, if MLR had both men's and women's sides, I think that'd be actually a really attractive model, but it would require a lot of negotiation. And the other piece that I love about that idea, pipe dream idea is that, you think about all the other employment opportunities that would bring for people who want to stay involved in the game. People could get paid to coach. People, and some do, especially at the college level, but at club level, typically, this is not something where you quit your day job. But think about the number of referees that would also be brought in, right, through the ranks. People in management who might not see those as really valued skills, but they are highly valued at the level of needing professional management and communications and media. And, it would open up a whole avenue for folks who love this sport and may not, want to play at that higher level. That may not be an aspiration, but they love to continue to be involved. Oh my gosh, it'd be magical. But it would take a lot of money. And there has to be that input, because for too long, rugby in the States has been grassroots. We need grassroots rugby, don't get me wrong, but what I'm trying to say is self-pay, pay to play. And the pay to play model at a professional level would not work, would not be a good product. Challenge would be, somebody showed up and said, here's I'm going to give you, $3 million a year to run a league, which is nothing, right? For when you think about running a league, they'll give you $5 million a year to run a league. Okay. Think about, we'd have to create some sort of structure so that, again, just like playing, you wouldn't be in competition for, a bigger pot of the money, but rather you'd be in, this place where let's think about how we can use this to our best abilities to increase our player development, and competition level and all that kind of good stuff on the field, but then also to build all these other structures, because if we don't build all these other structures, it's not going to be sustainable. It would be incredibly cool. I'd love it.